Welcome to another episode of the Deeper Than Dough podcast. I'm super excited to have our guest, Marnie Battista, on the show. Marnie, thank you for joining. Welcome.
I'm happy to be here. So fun.
Marnie, I'm super excited to jump into this because, we started talking a little bit, the should life. That's what I'm most excited about. I'm sure we'll unpack a lot. Do you mind giving us just a minute or two of whatever you choose to give us as far as your background, who you are?
Yeah. So I've been a coach for about 15 years, which is like a grandma in this business, it feels like. And I started my business at about 2009-ish as a dating coach. I always sort of think of coaches as like, you have this thing that you fix and then you want to help other people get out of their pain. And I had been divorced and I met my husband, my second husband, and I was like, I got this dialed in. And I built this really big business. We had almost $2 million of revenue for lots of years in a row. But the thing is that while I was helping women date, really what I was helping them do was actually design life on their terms. It was almost like the problem they think they had in life was that they couldn't find a guy. But once they started to unpack who they really are, they looked around their life and they're like, wait, I need to redo this whole thing. So I was having clients stay with me for like 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, right? Really creating this life that they love. And around 2020, just before lockdown, I got in a serious ski accident in Canada. Double black diamond, didn't like me. And I went down on a toboggan and barely made it back to America and was in bed for 3 months. And while I was supposed to be recovered, and the doctor said, like, you shouldn't have pain, I still did. I had cracked 7 fractures in my sacrum. It was healed, but I wasn't able to basically resume any sort of normal activity. And I had an opportunity to have a conversation with a mentor who said something really profound and said, you've cracked the foundation. That's the sacrum. And you need to rebuild. So interestingly, my father had just died and I had gone to a religious service and I had heard about these 7 questions that you are asked in this story in the Old Testament at the pearly gates. And in this moment, you're asked these questions to decide if you've lived a meaningful life.
Okay.
And like the sky opened up and I was like, oh my gosh, I have these 7 fractures. I have these 7 questions. I have totally been living my life based on a set of success metrics that were not mine. They were decided for me years and years ago. And in that moment, sort of everything unfolded. And ultimately, I ended up selling my house after 20 some years. My kids left the nest. My husband and I set out on a road trip adventure for a year in an RV to figure out what really made me happy. And I ended up writing a book about it and shifted my whole business, my whole brand. And that's what I'm helping women do officially now, because I've been actually helping women do it for 15 years.
But now it's official.
It's
a little bit more of a clear path. I love that. First question is, where were you skiing?
Whistler.
Okay, where's I'm not familiar with it.
Canada.
Okay.
Just like
We're
about 3 hours away from Seattle.
Okay. I'm in Utah and there's tons of people that come here. There's a franchise conference that's held every year, which is really just let's ski during the day and drink at night. But hey, another side question before I dive into the deep stuff. Dating coach. Me and my wife are in season 6 of Sex in the City.
Nice. That's so funny.
Have you seen that show?
The OG
she's
one?
Not a dating coach at all, but she's writing on dating. And anyways, do you like the show? That's my other question.
I mean, I love the show. I actually, when I first had my business, I had these dating archetypes and I designed them after the girls in Sex in the City. And I was like, I was Samantha after my divorce. I totally admit it. And it did not serve me well long term until I got my head out of my,
I freaking love that so much. I mean, they do such a good job in portraying that in the show, and the writing in it is the best that I've seen. And maybe it's the first time I'm actually paying attention to it, but I'm like, everything just ties together and they're play on words. Anyways, there's a plug for Sex in the City.
Yay! The old one, not the new one so
The
much.
old one, not the new one. Okay, and then I want to jump into the something that you said that I've been focusing on maybe for the last 3 years or so, identifying the real problem. I'm going to give you a little background and then ask the question. It was about 3 years ago, I sold my solar company and I was working a lot and I got up to 300 something pounds, wife, three kids. And I was just like, everything is aside, right? Because as long as I can just have a good exit, that was the goal. But I didn't
Right.
take it to the end. It's like, oh, well, superficially, it was money.
Yeah.
Selling a business means money, and money means more vacation time, which means more time with my family. And turns out I like when I'm with my family. So, foolproof plan. And then you get to it and you hit the net worth that you're shooting for, whatever. And then you're like, oh my gosh, that was the wrong goal. If the goal was really just to be with my family, I could do that every freaking day. So, like,
Yeah.
identifying the right goal,
Yeah.
my view on that is if your goal isn't an emotion, it's not all the way. I mean, it's not the end goal, and this is why. No matter what goal we set, it's all, in my opinion, you want to feel a certain way. So figure out the feeling that you want to achieve. That's the goal. Then you set your sub goals, but like your main goal, if it's I want to be a millionaire or whatever, it's like, but how do you want to feel? And if it's not attached to your feeling, I think it's again where like at times you spend your whole life or weeks or months, whatever, but you're working so hard and you're going in the wrong direction. You're going to something that you think is going to achieve this goal that you haven't even really defined on the emotional status, and then you hit it and then it doesn't. So, anyways, I would love to know like
That's it.
give me some examples of you or people that you've worked with. Like, what are the superficial or the fake or the smoke screen goals? That's a sales term versus like when you're uncovering what they really want, what that translates to the real goal after they've had some work with you.
Well, I think it's really an interesting thing. So, whether it's money or title, right? There's some illusion of sort of like a freedom that you're going to have. And when you get that freedom, then you're going to start living your life, right? Then you're going to be happy. I think it's really ironic that in our culture, at least in America, that there's like either a number or like a financial number in the bank or like a retirement age number, right?
Yeah.
And so like the whole like mythology of that is like, I live my life and I do these things, and then when this thing happens, then I'll finally do the life that I want, and then I'll be happy. Well, my mom died at 64. I was 55 when I had this whole thing. And I was like, if I had 9 more years to live, literally, if I knew, do I
Yeah.
want to spend it like looking at pictures of my kids who are now grown up, waiting for them to come back and visit me, working a million hours fighting with my husband all the time? Not
Yeah.
so much. Right. And so I think that most people have an idea that freedom is attached to a number, and it's an age or it's an income goal. And that when you start to understand that life is precious and that you can have what you want, you can have joy in that emotional state without having to blow up your life, because nobody wants to do that. That there's an actual way to figure out what would bring you more joy, more fun, more freedom without blowing up your life. Then you're like, well, why wouldn't I take that path? And that's really what I'm helping my clients do. And they're like, oh crap, this is amazing. Like, I have freedom and I didn't have to wait.
Yeah. People are always, how do I scale my business? How do you do franchising, this and that? And I'm just like, why do you want to do it? Well, I could, and the people that have thought about it a little bit more, this is usually the conversation. It's like, well, if I build a big business, that means more money, and with more money, I could impact more people. And I'm like, but why do you feel like you need to impact more people? Like, what's lacking in you that makes you feel like impacting more people is going to fulfill that? And then it's like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen a lot of therapists.
Right. Well,
I'm using their techniques on you.
no, but it's really true. In fact, I was just talking to a publicist about my book that's coming out in February 2025, and she was like, "Why do you care?"
Yeah.
you know and I was like, well, I have a mission to to help people, and I want people to have this freedom, and I don't want them to have to wait. And because helping people understand that they're living a backup life and they don't even realize it half the time is it's just like my gift. So not only is there an emotional state, I think, with getting out of the should life, but you're getting to express your unique soul, your gift. There's only one Bennett, one Marnie, right? And we're here to do something. And if we can organize our life so that in all the areas of our life, we're just expressing the crap out of ourselves and everything we do, that's going to feel resonant. We're going to have joy. We're going to have peace. We're going to have fun. We're going to have all of those things that people wait till they're old
Yeah,
or they have a crisis, to like start living their life like it matters.
I love that. I want to get into the should life first and define that. And then you mentioned a little bit about religion. In my view, maybe I'm a little too cynical on religion, but I view a lot of the should life is, I mean, it's just society and culture. And part of that, at least for me growing up in Utah, very religious growing up. I served like a 2-year Mormon mission in Mexico. They just ship you off and they say, learn Spanish, come home in 2 years. Um, Anyways, love to dive into that. But after, can we just define a little bit more?
Yeah.
What is the should life? And talk to me about that.
Yeah, so the should life is the life that was designed by the rules of the world that you have created. So let me elaborate. Now, I
Okay.
have talked to a lot of podcast hosts that are men and women. So this is also a quiz, a gender quiz. So what is your favorite fantasy like movie or series, like Marvel movies? Like what's your like maybe
Yeah,
that's fiction? What's your
I
thing?
love Marvel. I haven't seen Lord of the Rings forever, but I love those ones as well. I also don't watch a ton of TV, but those are two
Those are
really
your
good ones.
okay.
Yeah.
The reason why when I ask women, for all the females that are listening, most everyone says Bridgerton right now, by the way. So if that's your thing. Uh, but
I know the gossip. I haven't seen it, but my wife's always watching it. And if I just get a clip, I'm like, wait, who's she talking about? Who's the Mrs. Whistleton? Whatever.
yeah, exactly. Okay. So, but the thing is, we watch these shows where we read these novels, and pretty quickly, if it's well done, we believe there are rules in this world, right? There are rules. I mean, there's the
Yeah.
blip. I mean, we just believe it, right? Because everything depends on the blip in Marvel movies. Um, and so, what happens is that as humans, we have the rules of our own world. And they were given to us and they were reinforced and then they were created by all the experiences that we have. And so the should life is the world that you live in, your world of one, where there is a set of rules, there's a set of characters, there's what you can do, what you can't do. And you wake up and you're like, wait, like this is an illusion that has been created by a set of beliefs. And we come to a point in our life and we're like, what would it look like if I start to question every single thing and ask ourselves, why is this true? Like we were talking about before, like who's they said that you should do that, right? And that's the should life.
I love that. So it's one, you have to recognize that that's the should life. And to break free, it's question the heck out of everything. And I like the word that you use, illusion. I listen to a guy a lot right now. He's passed away for many years. His name's Alan Watts. He was popular in like the 60s and 70s. Sounds like you've heard of him.
Yeah, yeah.
And he like right now I'm in a book of his and talk again the illusion of the self. And you're like, what does that even mean? What do you mean the self doesn't exist? How do you even gonna claim that? And then the way he explains it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you are really good at it. There's a neuroscientist, and he has a meditation app named Sam Harris, and I
Yes.
follow him as well. And I've heard it from him too, the illusion, but it never clicked. And then I listened to the Alan Watts and him explain like your consciousness or your ego is just what you're aware of, because that's all it can be, right? And how much of you that you think is you are you aware of? Do you know how your hand moves? Do you know how your heart beats? Do you know how you're like you know nothing about yourself. You're you have a very limited amount of experiences based on a very limited amount of sensories that you have in your body. And then you're building up like what is you, but when in fact you know nothing about yourself. Anyways, and on that first time I'm like, okay, maybe I'm starting to understand why the
Yeah,
self is an illusion.
I love that. So my metaphor is a shopping cart. We've all been to Costco. You know how you go to Costco, you got the thing, and you just start pulling stuff off
I
the
was there two
shelf.
days ago,
Okay.
$760 later, I was out. I didn't even have anything to go there for. I'm like,
Exactly. So through life, we like have this giant shopping cart and we start pulling things in that are identity, right? That are like ego, like, a nice car, the number in your investment
Yeah.
portfolio, a handsome partner or beautiful partner, right? And so then we're like, oh, well, this is me. And we think we are the shopping cart, but we are not the shopping cart. We are just pushing it.
Mhm. I love that. That's a really good analogy. And I'm still trying to figure out the difference between, I don't know. I don't want to get into that. Maybe I will later and get your
Talk
advice on
about
it.
it later.
But
Yeah.
the your thoughts are a stream in the river, and you aren't your thoughts because you're just watching them, but it's like, well, there's nothing else actually watching them. You are the river. There's not a river of thoughts and somebody standing by and perceiving them. There's just the river and you're floating in it. Anyways, I don't even know.
That's so
Back
deep
to
and I love it. It's all part of the should life.
so this should like, but I'm just questioning everything. I'm like, maybe I'm questioning a little too much. Okay. So I wanted to bring in a little bit on for my experience, and I know in Utah it's a very religious culture, the Mormon or LDS culture, and it is there's exactly what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Like you should not drink coffee. I never had to question if I was supposed to drink coffee growing up for myself or tea. Like it was just no, because God said no. But there's a lot of that should life, and then it gets you in the habit of just like, oh, I'm part of the religion that is the one and only true church. They do have all the right answers. So as long as I just trust, then I don't have to figure out any of my own shit. Um, so my question packed in all of that is
Yeah.
how does religion play in the should life, either for or against it?
Wow, that's such an interesting question. I mean, I think that religion is an interesting topic and highly what's the right word? Binary, right? Because it's like this is good or this is bad. I think that what is the most important piece is to find a spiritual connection to something that is divine, whether it's outside of you, inside of you. I talk in my book about creating a stillness practice. And I think that stillness practice is really important. For some people, they're going to say, I want to talk to God as they define it, universe, source, whatever. For some people, it is connecting to nature, right? But the bottom line is that my belief is that there is something bigger that is created us, but is that our uniqueness inside of us, and
Yeah,
that
let me
we get to
let
express it.
and I didn't ask my question as effectively as I could have.
All right.
Um, Although I love all of that. How does it play a role in like in the should life?
Yeah.
Like, is
Well,
religion good or bad for the should life? Not in general or your religious beliefs or whatever, but just like in general, is that something that we should be doing as society? I'm like, here's a religion because a religion is a set of shoulds and shouldn'ts. But same with society, same with government, same with everything,
well,
right?
that's what I was going to say. So here's the thing. I think there is no good or bad. I think that what we need to do is for ourselves as individuals is to literally question every assumption and really figure out what is the essence that resonates. I have a client who grew up in Russia, and I'll never forget the conversation we had where she said, I remember the moment I was 10 years old. Up until 10, I believed I was lucky to live in Russia because I didn't have to make any decisions, right? And
Yeah.
then something came in and it shifted everything for her. And she was like, wait a minute, why is that the truth, right? And so I think that the most important thing is to understand that you have all these beliefs that were given to you by society, culture, parents, legacy, ancestors, whatever it is, social media. And you just go, is this really right for me or is it not? For some people, yeah, religion is going to be like awesome. For other people, it's not going to fit, or they're going to want to adjust it or find a way to express that in their own way.
Love it, love it. Um, you mentioned the no good and bad, which is, I feel like I'm crazy because I always say that. Like when my kids are always like good and bad, and I label things good as bad as well. But when I think about it, what I'm meaning when I label something good and bad is generally better for you slash society or generally worse, but not in the when I say I don't believe in good or bad, I don't believe in good and evil. I don't believe like uh anyways, I don't need to jump into it. Is that more or talk to me more about that? Like there is no good and bad. I just view people of like Hitler was a sick person with terrible genetics that got dopamine from having power and killing people. Thank God I don't get that. Thank God. He was unlucky in that sense, and I think I'm a little bit luckier, but I don't know if his he had a terrible soul. I don't know. Anyways, love to hear your input on that.
So I think that we grow up in our culture being evaluated and judged in certain categories, or all categories, as good or bad. And that when we're good, we get a cookie, a metaphorical cookie, right? And that means we're good. So we get a good grade, you get a home run, you get a great at bat, whatever it is, right? And so you start to organize. Our minds are meaning making machines, right? And so they want to organize things in a way that feels good. So that category, right, which is very performance oriented, becomes a metric, right? Because we learn that if I do something good, I get a reward, dopamine, a promotion, my parents pat me on the head, whatever it is. If I do something bad, most people start to learn then I am bad, right? Or I've done something bad. And so what we want to do is we want to like disconnect those things, right? We want to, in my opinion, create a value on the journey and the effort and the experience in itself, so that we stop measuring and judging, because judgment of self and others is what takes us out of joy and dumps us right back in the should life. Because our shoulds are like, okay, our brain is going, well, that's a cookie, that's not.
I think the every most, I don't know, issues like mentally speaking, if you're not feeling the emotions that you're wanting to feel, come down to security, kind of like the
Yeah.
Maslow's hierarchy, like right at the bottom.
Yep.
And your brain for security is it seeks familiarity. So even if that familiarity is a shitty, for me, I feel like my brain has been addicted to just chaos. I grew up in, one of 9 kids with a single mom. Just it's chaos, and then I'm like, everything that I'm doing, I just feel like there's always chaos. And then somebody explained that, like, maybe that's what's comfortable for you, even though you don't like it. At least it's familiar, and that means safety. So I think it all comes back to that. I don't know. You mentioned focusing on effort. You mentioned a few other things, but effort stood out to me. I have 3 young kids, 7, 5, and 3, and I follow all the Instagram parent stuff,
Okay.
um, and one of them was saying there's a study that they had a bunch of kids. They did a test, and half the group they praised them for being smart, and half the group they praised them for trying hard. And then they had another test, and then the second test was way harder. The group that was praised for being smart realized that they couldn't solve this problem, so that means they're not smart. And then they got worse scores versus the people that were motivated, or can't even think of the word right there. They were.
They were
I'm gonna have to
rewarded.
edit all that
Were
out. I'm
they
just
That's where they
awarded,
rewarded
motive.
for
What do you?
something.
No, no, no. I'm gonna tell you what I'm trying to explain because this is
Okay.
embarrassing.
No, it's fine.
Um, Recognition. If they're recognized, okay,
Yes. Okay.
back up. Now I can start over. So the second group, if they were recognized for effort, then they focused on effort when they addressed those harder problems, and they didn't get down on themselves, and overall their scores went up quite a bit. Talk to me about why you said effort, and if it has anything to do with what I just mentioned.
Well, I think so. I have 3 kids who are 29, 26, and 22. So I see how this all pans out.
Yeah.
And so what I notice is that because our society doesn't reward effort, which showed in your study that it creates intrinsic motivation, which is something that creates empowerment, right? And that is the one thing that we can control. Um, then we constantly feel like we're not good enough, right? And so what happens, and there's an interesting book that was written for young girls, and it was called Brave, Not Perfect. And in her book, she posits that, especially for women, because they want to be perfect and get the cookie, right, and get the good grade or get the promotion. And I think this is true for men and women, but in her case, it was women specifically. They didn't try things that were hard, right? Because if I'm not going to be great at it, then I'm not going to do it, right? Because it's hard, it doesn't feel good. What will people think? And so, can you see how that creates the should life, right? Because if someone told you, you're good at math when you're 7, and you're like, cool, I'm just going to keep doing math. And then you struggle in PE, you're going to be like, I'm bad at PE. I'm not athletic. I'm not capable. I'm good at math. I'm just going to stick to doing math, and I'm going to stop doing a whole set of things. And people don't learn how to be courageous. They don't learn how to be imperfect, and they don't reward themselves for that effort. And that's the journey of life. So ultimately, the universe is going to make you learn the lesson, at some point.
I love that a ton. Universe is going to make you, yes, you will learn in one way or another. It's just how stubborn you
Exactly.
want to be, probably. Um,
Exactly.
in the should life, we talked a little bit about like steps on how to break through. We just briefly mentioned questions. I would love to dive into that. Like, what are the types of questions that we should be asking ourselves to recognize that we're in the should life? And then any other tips or steps in order to either recognize it and or get out of it.
Yeah. So when you think about the old way, I'll just call it the old way, where you and I were talking about having reached this success financially or externally, and then not feeling joy, fulfilled, freedom, not spending time with the people you want. Um, you Most people ask these questions, the how questions, like they're coming to you, right? Like, how do I scale my business? How do I sell in an online store? How? And so, one of the most important things in debunking the should life is one of these questions, and it says, "Were you? Like, are you being your core of who you are in your life?" And this is important because I would like people to start focusing less on the how, while it's important, but more on who do I have to become, right? Who am I to get the relationship, to be a CEO, to be a better leader, to be abundant, have a great marriage, right? Because the skills and the tactics and the strategies are super important. But if who you're being as a person isn't an expression of you at your highest self, and you're operating out of jealousy, judgment, fear, lack, right? The strategies kind of don't work long term. So one of the greatest questions you can start asking, I call it like a wisdom seeking question, is like, who do I need to be? How do I need to show up more as myself so that I can actually do these things that I want? Because most of us have a shit ton of limitations and limiting beliefs and things that are in our way that are keeping us from really living a life of authenticity.
Yes, I love that. You mentioned something, operating of fear. That's what resonates with me. I'm like, I'm doing everything to make sure I don't lose something that I've already had, or like, anyways.
Attachment, yeah.
And again, if it before it was like, if I just have enough money, that'll go away, which I didn't even recognize that was. So I'm kind of back to one of the first things that you brought up, which is actually knowing what your problems are. I forgot how you phrased it, but making sure that you're on the right target.
Yeah. So this is a great thing. So when I talk to people, and this happened in my own life, right? So in my journey, it's funny, I had an article that was in the LA Times. I wrote like an essay. Bless my husband, he lets me write about him. And basically in this essay, I was like, I want my husband to change. I think my problem is that my husband's not working, right? Like, we had an agreement. He helped me raise my kids, and now my kids are grown. And like, if he would only change, then we'd be happy, right? I have clients who are like, if only my boss would stop filling my calendar with a bunch of crappy meetings. If only my parents, my elderly parents, would blah, blah, blah. If only my kids would, right? And so what happens is that we get completely derailed by these things, rather than stepping into what is it that I can do that will allow me to start to do what I need to do now, right? By that being part. And so it's really, really important that you discover what I call, what is the essential problem, right? For me, the problem was I was just terrified of change. So I just was blaming my husband. It was so much easier, right? Or blaming anything, any other situation. It's not your boss's fault per se. It's not your spouse's or your kids. And so what we need to do is there's usually a deeper problem that's internal. The good news is when you figure out the essential problem, it's typically a you problem, which means that you can actually solve it rather than trying to put all your energy in to get other people to change.
I love okay, so that was the verbiage you used, that what is the essential problem? That's what I was trying to get at earlier. And I do think that, man, what 99, at least 99% of people, we haven't figured that out yet. It's again, it's still, well, I need money. Money's going to solve it. But it's like, no, what's the essential problem? Um, what are some typical examples of, like, again, diving into maybe some of your clients, obviously not sharing any names, but most common in women, what are the typical essential problems that they weren't aware about?
Yeah, so I have a client who is a PhD, like super high level executive. She came to me and she was like, Thelma, this is typical, Thelma and Louise, like, I want to get in my car and like drive off a cliff and like never go back to work again. Like, my work is the problem, you know? What we realized was that the essential problem was that she didn't believe that she mattered. So she didn't set boundaries. She didn't ask for what she wanted at work. She thought that she was constantly on the chopping block. In fact, we just had a conversation and she was like, I can still be the number one employee and also have a life and put my needs first.
Yes.
And right. And so nothing changed. Like, her boss didn't change, her company didn't change, nothing changed. She realized that she mattered and she started showing up differently in her work. And everything shifted, right? I had another client, same thing. She thought that her calendar was the problem, and that people that worked for her kind of sucked. They were kind of lame. So she had to do it all, right? A lot of my clients are very excited to show me their calendar, to show me how it's all blocked out and there's no time to do anything else. So for her, the essential problem was that she felt like she had to do everything herself. She couldn't delegate. So the essential problem, she was kind of a control freak. Once she
Self-worth
started,
attaching to that, because I
yeah,
feel like that for entrepreneurship, that's a lot. It's like, if I'm not busting my ass, then I'm not valuable. And you're like, how do you get rid of that?
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting is when she started to do this work with me, she went to her boss and she had a conversation. And her boss was like, yeah, honestly, like, you have a leadership problem, like, you need to delegate your team, like,
Trust.
yeah. So in the end, which was crazy, was when she started doing this, guess what happened? There was no budget, but suddenly she started getting more team. Suddenly, everyone on her team started having better output and better productivity. Everything in her life changed. And then she ended up figuring out a way to retire early with a great package and is going to move to Portugal, right? And so, but it all started from taking responsibility and asking, like, you know what, this is a me thing. If you ask that question, this is a really powerful one. Write it down. What is this challenge here to teach me? It's a universe
Yeah.
lesson, right? And when we get out of blame, I call it like rage, blame, too tired and too exhausted to deal with it pattern, because that's the pattern that people get in, and start saying, what is this constant repeating challenge here to show me or teach me? Then you are now empowered to take responsibility and start asking better questions and change the one thing that you can, which is yourself.
I mean, it's completely perspective. Pain is only pain if you think it should be hurting. Like, if it's pain at the gym, you're fine with it. If it's pain in an ice bath, you're fine with it. And I love that because it just helps you, okay, well, what am I going to learn? Who am I becoming is another thing that you've mentioned. And you said it all starts with, it all started with her taking ownership, and maybe it did, or maybe it started with her hiring and seeking help, and then you walking her through how to take ownership. Uh,
Well, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. I'm glad you said that, because for every person who realizes something, they don't ask for help or get support. And there's a great coach. She's an OG, Mary Morrissey, and she says, awareness without action is entertainment. And so you can like aha the hell out of yourself and underline your books and listen to all your podcasts. But if you don't actually say like, what am I going to do about it? Then you're just like helping me and Bennett get downloads. And we love that. But what we really want is for you to like take action and get some help to see what you can't see.
Favorite quote so far is underlining the book. Like, look what I'm doing. It's going to make a difference. You're like, but what are you doing? And a lot of it, at least for me, tell me if you relate to this. I'm always way better at giving advice, right? Because
Yeah.
I know what to do in a lot of senses, but then when it comes to actually doing it, there's a million distractions. And recognizing that in myself is then easier for me to go ask for help with a business coach or advisors or a mental health therapist. It's
Yeah.
like, help me manage this because I know that even if I think I know it, one, and then there's the whole accountability thing. So I was very hesitant to hire the first business coach that I did because I was like, well, I've already started a business, I've sold it, this one's doing well. Why would I pay if my business is already bigger than his? Why would I spend that money? But I'm like, it's not about that. It's not about that. It's just about I could only see what's I'm limited to focus on whatever thoughts are in my head at that time. And there's only so many things you could think about. So getting help, just a very big proponent of go get help and go get help where it matters. And where it matters is achieving how you want to feel and getting a coach or a therapist or somebody more focusing on that. Like the business side's great. You need to get a big business. But as we've already talked about, and you've probably, everybody's already heard, it's not going to get you where you want to go.
Well, no. I mean, I think that it's really interesting. I think about like asking for help and vulnerability in the same category, like why do you think TED Talks or if you watch someone really share something vulnerable, like it goes viral, right? Because someone's being real. And we admire that, right? We admire people's courage and strength. I mean, we just got done, with the time we're recording this, watching the Olympics for 2 weeks, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're like, oh my God, look at all these people are overcoming. That's amazing, right? And we admire it. And then we get into a space ourselves and we think, well, I'm different, you know? And I want everyone who's listening to understand like you have that capability and capacity inside of you. All those people had a great coach, right? All of those people took a risk and allowed themselves to be seen. And so why, there's that why not you, why not now, right? And I believe that. And so for those things that you admire, you dream of, like you have an opportunity to do that risky thing, to be vulnerable, to take the list, to ask for help, and magic happens when you do that.
Yes. And how much easier would it be if you weren't focused on, am I winning or am I losing? And rather than, am I putting in as much effort? And am I focused on what is this challenge going to teach me? Even if the challenge is I don't even make it or I lose or I make a fool of myself. And it's prepping yourself, I think, way before leading up to that, that makes the difference. And that's everything that you're talking about and sharing with your clients. And I freaking love that you're doing that.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is like I had this business and had a trajectory and then everything started to get stuck, right? And so there was like a big waste of energy and time where I was like, what's wrong with me? What's the right answer? What's the right answer? What's the right answer? And I was just thinking about this yesterday because yesterday like I had a really light schedule and this morning I was thinking I woke up and I was reading my book and excited about doing this podcast. And I was thinking like the universe was acting for me, right? Like I didn't fail, so to speak. What happened was that I got realigned to the life that I really want to have. And now in retrospect, like 4 years later, I can look back and I go, dang, I don't want to be 60 with a team of like 25 people. That's like not the life that I want to live. So when things are challenging and if they're not going the way you want, there's a tendency to force and push. And I would say like if you could surrender to the goal and ask, is this a goal I should have? And you start going, is this really for me? Is this something that I really want? Just like ease the pressure and then start asking those better questions. That challenge or that failure or that thing that didn't work right actually might be like directing you on the right path.
Yep. Sex in the City. I just watched the episode that Charlotte, she's like, no, it's everything's good. Same thing. Just there's perspective. Because if I had to get married and then divorced, then I would have now been engaged to Harry. And
Love
it's just like,
Harry.
but it's just perspective, right? And I love that you're sharing that. So I appreciate all your time. I told you you're going 30 minutes. I went over because you're freaking awesome. And
Oh, thanks.
we will include all of your links to connect with you. But before we hop off, last thing, can you tell me right before you have to go about your book?
Yeah. So I have a book coming out in February 2025, published by Hay House, called Your Radical Living Challenge: 7 Questions for a Meaningful Life. And what I have ready right now is actually a quiz to decode your destiny. What is your personality type to actually achieve the kind of success that actually will fill your heart with joy, peace, and fun? So, how far are you
It's
away from it? So, definitely take the quiz. I've had fun having people take it and being like, "Oh, this is me."
where where do we find the quiz?
Decodeyourdestiny.org.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. I appreciate it.